Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Deadly Summer, Nora Sommer Caribbean Suspense, Book 1 by Nicholas Harvey, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, A Truth Best Unknown. Olivia watched the young woman leave with the disheartening feeling they'd never meet again. She had no way of knowing how true that would be. Seeing any student drop out was heartbreaking. There was always a story, a reason, something insurmountable in the young person's life, or seemingly insurmountable. They had talked for an hour, and while she understood and sympathized with the girl's plight, she hated the unraveling circumstances that brought them to this point. A catch-22. A no-win situation. For either of them. Returning to her desk, Olivia shifted her focus back to the task she could now attack with new information. Usually, she loved problem solving, delving into the details, analyzing data, and finding solutions. But tonight's problem held no joy, no satisfaction. It didn't take long to see the discrepancies. A pang of fear raked through the professor's body like a chill wind. It was one thing suspecting a study had been compromised, but staring at cold, rock-hard proof sent a shockwave through her. Olivia sat back in her chair and nervously chewed the temple tip of her eyeglasses. There was no way of unknowing the facts before her, leaving only two choices: ignore them or do something about it. Ignoring them was unimaginable, unethical, and a myriad of other terms she couldn't live with. Acting meant challenging a senior tenured professor and the study he had personally overseen. That could be career suicide, but this was bigger than her career. Olivia checked her watch. It was 10:55 p.m. She had long since been the only one left in the science wing of the university, the school she had put her heart and soul into for the past 12 years. The University of St. Petersburg was a small private university nestled on the peninsula in western Florida that formed the city of St. Pete. She loved living here. She loved working at the school. Now, having stumbled across these irregularities, all that would change. She sighed and wished irregularity was the right word, but it wasn't. This was no innocent oversight. She had no idea how far up the food chain this went, but she suspected the top. Plugging a USB memory stick into the computer, Olivia began copying files. She figured later at home she would highlight the areas of interest and contradictions, but for now the pertinent files would do. Rubbing her temple, waiting on another file to save, she realized how dog-tired she felt. She closed her eyes and drew in a long, even breath. Tonight had been a long-run night. She opened her eyes and looked at the gym bag on the floor untouched. Her strict marathon training had taken a back seat to a bigger problem. A sound resonated from behind her, and she quickly turned, startled. The air conditioning had kicked on again, and the ducting groaned as cool air once more surged through the vents. The time between cycles had been getting longer and longer since the sun went down, and Olivia chastised herself for being so jumpy. Outside her office, the hallway was dark, the lights having automatically turned off after 5 minutes without movement. Turning back, Olivia right-clicked the next file, selected copy, then dropped it onto her memory stick and watched the two-tone green bar work its way across the window on the screen. She looked towards the dim hallway again. Something was different. Getting up from her chair, she walked over to her doorway and checked both ways. The lights flicked on as the motion sensor picked up her movement. The hallway to her office fed a series of similar offices used by various professors and assistants. They all had windows facing the car park, as she did. On the opposite side were the doors into several laboratories. Olivia looked down the hall to her right. At the end, another hallway ran perpendicular, giving access to the exterior door. And in the opposite direction, more labs deeper in the building. That hallway light was on. Someone else must be in the building. Gathering up her shoulder bag, Olivia hastily copied one more file before shutting down her desktop computer. She stuffed a handful of papers from her desk into the bag and grabbed her keys. She tried to convince herself it was probably a student who'd left something behind, but her heart still pounded in her chest. There had been no sound of a door opening and closing, yet someone had tripped the motion sensor in the entry corridor. Maybe they came in quietly? The thought did not calm her nerves. Remembering her gym bag, she stepped back across the room and scooped it up by the strap. As she locked her office door and walked down the hall, Olivia's legs were shaking. Reaching the end of her hallway, she tentatively peeked around the corner, then whipped her head in the other direction. She realized the last time she'd taken a breath was in her office, and she gasped, mocking herself for being so ridiculously paranoid. The night air was warm and dry, the mild winter a far cry from the Florida summer. Sounds from the city gave her comfort as she strode across the well-lit car park to her BMW. The thought occurred to her as she opened the car door that perhaps someone had been leaving the building rather than entering. She looked all around. There were only 2 other cars, and neither were occupied. Probably students who were carpooling or sleeping over. Regardless, she decided getting in the car and locking the doors. She was on her way home where a glass of wine and a good night's sleep awaited. From the car park, Olivia took Roosevelt Boulevard a short distance to Interstate 275 and headed south. It was 16 miles to her house on Treasure Island, but the cross-city commute still took 30 minutes even late in the evening. She drummed her fingers on the steering wheel, still consumed by the new knowledge she'd uncovered. She looked at the time. It was 11:26 p.m. Tapping the phone controls on the steering wheel, she hesitated before selecting the speed dial number. He'll be asleep, she thought, and cursed herself for not calling earlier to set his mind at ease. She hit the button, and the sound of the phone ringing came from the BMW's speakers. "Hey," came a man's sleepy voice after 6 rings. "I'm sorry it's so late, hon," she apologized. "I'm on my way now." "Okay," he replied, and she heard him yawn. "Find anything?" "Pour me a glass of wine," she said. "I'll give you the brief when I get there." "Yeah, okay," he mumbled. "You won't believe it," she couldn't help adding. "Really?" he said with a mixture of surprise and disappointment in his voice. "Really," she replied. "I'll be there in 20. I'm halfway down 275. Love you." "Okay, see you in a while," he muttered, and the line went dead. Olivia smiled and pictured her husband asleep on the couch, oblivious to the last 3 innings of the baseball game on the television. Wine, husband, and sleep, she thought, feeling slightly guilty for missing the most important one from her earlier list of upcoming necessities. Exiting 275, she drove down 5th Avenue until it narrowed, then turned south on 58th to Central, where she turned right. Central Avenue would become Treasure Island Causeway, a series of bridges island hopping across the bay towards Gulf Boulevard, the coastal road serving the island communities and beaches on the Gulf. Olivia always felt like she was home the moment she left the mainland across the first short bridge to the South Causeway Isles. She crossed over Park Street, where the road narrowed down to 1 lane each way, and could see the streetlights illuminating the pale concrete pavement of the bridge ahead. What she didn't see was the box truck, approaching from Sunset Drive, a narrow bay front street on her right. The impact was sudden, loud, and devastating. All the air was pressed from Olivia's lungs as the truck shoveled the BMW across the road into the central dividing wall. The considerable mass of the truck buckled and crushed the passenger door deep into the driver's compartment as the car was bashed across the lane. Olivia's body whipped to the right, then viciously snapped back when the car was pinned against the wall. Her head smashed the driver's side window, and the dislodged passenger seat shoved her midriff hard against the driver's side door. The ear-splitting sound of crumpled metal, engine revs, and glass shattering disappeared as quickly and suddenly as it had begun. Olivia wafted in and out of lucidity and fought to stay awake. Her face hurt and felt wet, but she didn't remember having a drink with her. Where did the water come from? Maybe it wasn't water. There was pain, but it seemed far away, almost disconnected. She knew something was terribly wrong with her right arm, but it dare not look. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad if she didn't see the injury. Her legs felt numb and heavy, and something rested on her lap. She tried moving, and a sharp pain shot through her ribs, causing her to wheeze. White balloons hung limply all around, and somewhere in her hazy mind she realized they were deflated airbags. The more she came around, the worse the pain ascended from every corner of her body. Her ears were ringing, and her head throbbed. She heard a distant car door with a surge of relief and hope. Help was already here. It was likely a passerby, but at least an ambulance would be called, and even in her dazed state she knew an ambulance was needed. She couldn't move her head, but from the corner of her eye she could see the buckled front of the truck embedded in the side of her lovely car. Hopefully the driver was okay, she thought, her concern quickly turning to anger. It was his stupid fault. Something annoyingly hissed from the twisted metal. Damn it, she thought. Just paid off the loan, and my insurance rates will go through the roof. She She heard someone scrambling along the wall on her left, and she looked over as best she could. They must have been using the roof for balance, as she heard several thumps above. A shadow blocked the streetlight. "Thank you," she attempted to say, but all that emanated was a raspy wheeze. Whoever it was didn't say a word, but she sensed his presence and picked up a slight scent of his cologne. Olivia felt a prick in her left arm amongst the building pain from every limb, and her heart began to race. One moment she had been uncomfortable, yet calmly assessing the damage, and the next her heart was beating out of control as though she were terrified. The person leaned across her, and his shoulder knocked her face, causing a sharp pain in her broken nose. Her heart rate continued to escalate, seemingly out of control, and an overwhelming feeling of panic consumed her. Olivia felt the man pushing and moving things around her, and wondering how any of that was helping to get her out of the wreckage. The weight lifted from her lap, and the man withdrew from the broken side window, dragging her shoulder bag with him. Her heart pounded, ready to explode, as her head spun and nausea suddenly consumed her. She felt herself passing out and desperately fought to stay conscious, but she couldn't hang on. Then everything stopped, and her heart wasn't racing anymore.